The topic of tonight's discussion is going to be about the resistance that I've received in my attempt to ensure that we do get an RP server. And I'll also be talking about how I would argue against that opposition and why people should care in general. And, just what my overall perspective is. So, right off the bat, I can tell you that one of the biggest concerns I've run into from people that are interested in the game is the cost of creating an RP server. And while I can understand this being a concern, it's really not warranted. The RP rule set will not vary that much in reality from the rule set on the other servers. All CSE really needs to do is take one of the servers they're planning, and we know that they do mean for more than one server, and make that into an RP server. Yes, there's going to be some different rules, but really not so many that I think that's going to take away from it. It's not going to require any special coding outside of maybe a couple of extra report tabs. The big expense is going to come in with the GM support to actually properly support the server. And MJ does have some plans on that. If you're a backer, you already know what it is. I'm not going to get into that now until such time that MJ actually releases what he wants to do publicly. Now, all we really want to do is start with one server. As much as I'd like to start with 3 to test out all the realms and be able to roleplay while doing it, 1 is all that's really necessary at the beginning. We don't want too many to splinter the community. Now, that being said, as I said, there will be some extra costs in managing RP servers, which could be reduced by having a volunteer program similar to the guide program in EQ2. I was actually a guide in EQ2 and I had a ball. This is something that does not even have to be confined to RP servers. I played on an RP server, but I was a guide on a non-RP server, and it's a great way to get the player base involved in random real-time events. And I am sorry for any delay you're seeing. I do have a slow uptime speed, so there's going to be a delay. There's not really much I can do about that without having someone someone else streaming for me. I'm going to tinker around with it and see if I can make that in the future. I actually usually just remake the video and post it on YouTube, so you don't have to worry about that. It'll be a nice smooth stream there. So, sorry about that. I've got to get this back up. There we go. Now, some of the other arguments that I've received against role-playing servers have been to reiterate the fact that we can make a home and a community on any server on release. And while this is true, my retort to this is that it splinters the RP community and makes it difficult for new role players or new players to the game to figure out which server the role players have claimed. This goes for non-role players too. It can be frustrating to go onto a server that you think is going to fit what your needs are, only to find that it's actually been taken over by role players. Or the reverse can be true if there's a roleplay designated server and we find out that it's been taken over by non-role players. It can be frustrating either way, and it's just better if we have a server that's designated for it, so it's as clear as it possibly can be. It's I mean, really, that's it in a nutshell. Not having a server at release is a bad idea, I think. Even if you release a server afterwards, it's not going to help alleviate that. You're going to have players who have, regardless of the fact that it's not an RP server, become acclimatized to the server, and they're not going to want to switch. They're going to want to stay on the non-RP server just because they do have friends there, whether they're role players or not, or they're going to be used to the community there. I mean, this is a game that is highly built on realm pride, and you're going to have a sense of server pride too. So I think there would be problems with doing it afterwards. Now, this one hasn't cropped up that often. However, it has come up enough that I feel the need to mention it here. I have had a few people that think that being a role-playing server negates the fact that this is going to be a PvP-centric game. Somehow the rules would be different and the role players would be able to sit around a campfire like one big happy family or something. This is not what will be happening, though. We will still be fighting the same war as everyone else, and we'll be in character while we're doing it. Well, most of us. Some people won't be role-playing while they're fighting, but that's fine. To each their own. I have never understood that assumption. I've seen it more often than you might think. With this being a PvP-centric game, I'm not sure how the people who have come up with that one thought it was going to work. I've also gotten people who assume that role players and the role-playing server is going to be the first to die. And this just isn't true. Yeah, as a game loses subscription, then they may well combine an RP server with a regular server. And that ends up giving the illusion that the server was underpopulated or that it had died. But that's not necessarily true. I mean, you see things like this in WoW a lot too, where they have so many role-playing servers that some of them are dead. Some of them don't have any role-playing on it. And it's just because there's so many more servers than they really need for the role-playing community. There's usually about 2 to 3 servers in WoW that actually have a large active community. There's not any more than that I think are really needed. That's also part of, Soul, I'm going to say Sold, said that it depends on the number of servers. Really, I don't think it does. I think we need to just start with one. And then if there's enough of a community or enough of a player base and that RP server has a good population and it looks like we'll need another one, then we can add them on. I don't think we need to start out with more than one, because unless of course MJ gets a way bigger response than I have to my attempts, if he does decide to do this. I guess a lot of it's just going to depend on what the population is, but all I think we'll need is one at the beginning. Of course I could be wrong. And some other people have brought up that role players tend to be the ones that are going to cling to the game for the longest. And I can kind of agree with that. I mean, I still go back to WoW from time to time, but it's not for the game. It's not for the game at all. It's for the role players. It's for the friends that I've made there. And I always make it a point to research which server has a strong role-playing community, as well as go by word of mouth from my friends if any of them still happen to be playing. I've gotten some arguments that role players can easily ignore griefers just by using an ignore command, and this is primarily against the need for extra GM support. This does not always fix the issue, though. Yeah, I can understand that we're not the only ones that get griefed, and there should be anti-griefing rules on all of the servers if you ask me. However, the assumption that you can go on and roleplay while someone is pretending to do illicit things to your avatar by sitting down and standing up or other things like that, simply because you have them on ignore, is crazy. They're not going to go away, and it's still a distraction. Even if you can't hear whatever they're saying or typing, so to speak, you're still going to see them. Or even the ones that go around and spam abilities that may work out of combat. Those aren't really easy to ignore. Sometimes you can incorporate that into whatever you're doing, but it's not something that you can really ignore. I may be able to ignore someone running around in circles, just in character, or incorporate them as seeing them as simple, or depending on the situation. You know, there's any number of things you could do. We do what we can, but there still really needs to be protection against them. There's been some objections simply because people don't want to be forced to RP if they're on the server. And I'm not saying that every single person on the server has to be a role player. It's just not likely going to be that way. People join RP servers for a variety of reasons. Some think the community is better. Some just don't want to see stupid names. And many are actually role players. I don't think that RP should be forced, but if you are going to join a server with an RP tag, then you do still need to follow the rules. They are laid out for a reason. Namely, that's just going to mean not having dumb names, not talking about real world stuff in public chat. But you'll still have private chat rooms, I imagine, that you'll be able to talk in, or your guild chat. And those you can do whatever you want. Now, those are the main objections I've come up against. Many of them I've faced time and again, and I'll continue to argue against them, as I think most of them are unfounded. Now, as to why you should care, though, well, to me that's an easy one. For role players, it's pretty obvious. It's just going to be easier for you to find a server with like-minded players if there's one that has an RP tag on it. This game is also so open, and it's already got interesting lore and mechanics that I think it's going to be a great place to grow a role-playing community. Of course, like I said, most of you are already aware of that. For those of you that aren't interested in an RP server, or that have one of the objections that I've listed above, the reason that you should care is really simple, I think. And it's because if we don't have an RP server, then it very well may be your server that we try to claim. Would you rather have us going around in character on your server and annoying you? Or would you rather have it to where we have our own server and can play the way we want to? And that way you know, hey, we're not going to be on your server and we're not going to bug you. I really think the server would make it easier for all of us. Even for those of you that aren't interested, I think it's largely because there's a misunderstanding of what role play is. So I'm going to finish this by telling you what role playing is to me. And many of the backers have already seen this, but I just wanted to share it here as well for those of you who may not have. Role playing is collaborative storytelling to me. I can write background stories and try to create settings all day long. But it's more fun to participate with other people. The act of role-playing helps to shape my characters in ways that I never would have expected. And my characters end up taking on a life of their own, and they make decisions that often surprise me. It's not that different from participating in a pen and paper game, in my opinion. Simply because more often than not, you're already role-playing in a setting that someone else has created. Even if it's a setting that a friend of yours has created. In this sort of a setting, the role play is a little bit more fluid than pen and paper games because you're not really following an event that someone else has created for you. You can have your own storylines within it a bit more easily, sorry. It's also a creative outlet that not many people get that often. For myself, it allows me to share ideas that I have with other people in a more interactive way than simply telling a story. I mean, eventually, I would like to write a book. Is it going to be published? It's possible. I mean, you can self-publish through Amazon now. Will it get recognition and even a moderate-sized readership? I don't know. Maybe. But it still doesn't sound as much fun as being able to do an interactive story with someone else.